we have given that triangle ONP is congruent to triangle LPN, and N is the midpoint of OM segment and P is the midpoint of OK. We have to prove that triangles PLK, NML and ONP are congruent. So let me start from the beginning. We have given that triangle ONP is congruent to triangle LPN. It means that ON is congruent to LP, so we can mark that this segment is congruent to that, and we can write that ON is congruent to LP. What else? NP is congruent to PN. What else? We have that OP is congruent to LN segment. We know this because triangles are congruent triangles. It means that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So these statements we have from congruence of our two triangles. What else? The corresponding angles are congruent. So we will have that angle ONP is congruent to angle LPN, and angle NPO is congruent to angle PNL, and of course angle PON is congruent to angle NLP. So let's put this information on our diagram. I just put that ON is congruent to LP. What else? NP is congruent to PN, so to the same side, and OP is congruent to LN, so this side is congruent to that. What else we have? That corresponding angles are congruent, so angle ONP is congruent to LPN. Next we have that NPO is congruent to, let's put 2 marks now, to PNL, and angle PON is congruent to NLP. So let me put this mark. This is given. What else we have? Because these two angles are congruent, let me write this different color. Angle PNL is congruent to NPO. It means that segment NL and OP are parallel. So we can write that because angle PNL is congruent to angle NPO, we have that NL segment is parallel to OP segment. How I got this? If two lines are cut, if you extend this, two lines are cut by transversal, this is our transversal T, for example, so the alternate interior angles are congruent. We have these two angles congruent, and they are alternate interior angles because they are between these two lines and on opposite sides of our transversal. So alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So NL is parallel to OP. And because P is the midpoint of OK, and because P is the midpoint of OK segment, we can write that, so we can write that we have that NL is parallel to OK segment. NL was parallel to OP, but because P is midpoint of OK, it means that NL is parallel to OK segment. Next, if you look to our diagram, if we extend LP, LP will be transversal now to these two parallel lines, because we just showed that NL and OK are parallel. It means that this angle is the same like this. These two angles are congruent. Why? Because they are alternate interior angles, and if two parallel lines are cut by transversal, so alternate interior angles are congruent. So because angle MLP was congruent to PON, it means now that this angle is congruent to that. So we can put this green part. So let me write this, that next LP segment is transversal so angle NLP is congruent to angle KPL. And like I said, angle now, this angle is congruent to that. So we can write that this is congruent to angle PON. The same we have on the other side, because, let me write this, we have because angle ONP is congruent to angle LPN, It means that LP is parallel to ON segment, and because N is the midpoint of OM segment, it means that LP is parallel to OM segment. LP, we have another two alternate interior angles which are congruent. So it means that LP is parallel to OM, and because N is midpoint of OM, we can write that LP is parallel to OM. It doesn't matter if we write PL or LP or OM or MO. It's still the same segment. We have that angle NLP is congruent to angle LNM. So we can mark on our diagram. We have when LP is parallel to OM. So now when NL will be our transversal, these two lines are parallel. This is our transversal T. So now the alternate interior angles, it means the angles which are on the opposite sides of our transversal are congruent. So this angle is the same like that angle. What else? Because we have given that N is midpoint of OM, it means that the distance between O and N is the same like between MN or NM. It doesn't matter how we put the side. MN is equal to MN. So we can mark here red. These two sides are congruent. We can write MN is congruent to NO because N is the midpoint of OM. The same as with OP and PK. They are congruent because, let me write this, OP is congruent to PK because P is the midpoint of OK. So now we see that by the side angle, side we have here, and side angle side, side angle side, these two triangles are congruent. So let me write this, that by side angle side congruence postulate triangle PLK is congruent to triangle NML and to triangle ONP, because we see that corresponding sides are congruent and corresponding angles are congruent. So by side angle side congruence postulate, triangles PLK is congruent to triangle NML, and this triangle is congruent to triangle ONP. This is my solution.